The first one. Oh, great. 26 is great. Yeah. Yeah. Sounds great to me. I think this one is going to be quite long. All right. Yeah, I think so. It is. It is already recording. I think it's part of it that is fun to be part of the behind the scenes. No problem. I'm here.
See, I have to turn this one off.
Yes, it was really warm.
Too warm?
No, like a lekker warm.
Lekker warm. Okay, perfect. Yeah. Yeah.
All right, let's go to the beginning. Okay. Welcome to the 5th episode of Your Funding Network. Thank you for showing up and tuning in. We are almost towards the end of February. That means 1/6 of the year has almost gone. This means that 1/6 of the year is almost over, and we need to start with implementing the strategies that have been developed last year and fine-tuned at the beginning of this year. So how is it coming along for you? It's been rather surreal for me so far, with quite some developments in my research, business, and creative writing. The implications of applying for binding, my change management model, to all domains of my life have been positively overwhelming, and I'm excited to share more of this with you in this episode again. In this episode, I will be talking about systemic review. Systemic review is the first stage of the first phase of my personal and organizational transformation model that I have dubbed verbinding. As I mentioned in the last episode, verbinding has 3 phases, namely understanding, implementing, and scaling. Every phase of my model has 3 stages, and as promised, throughout 2022, I will share different parts of this model with you. And today we will talk about systemic review as the first stage. I will also talk about the role of the board in fundraising. I have referred to this element in the previous episode, and today we will dig much deeper in it. The role of the board in fundraising is critical. However, board members who have not been told that fundraising is part of their responsibility will not be willing to get involved. I will address this issue and many more in this episode. And lastly, I will share with you what I consider to be the true meaning of freedom. In most cases, when we are faced with a challenge, we want to immediately take an action to mitigate or eliminate the impact of the challenge. This is, of course, the right way to deal with crises in which we are facing immediate danger. No, let's do it again. This is of course the right way to deal with crisis in which we are facing immediate danger. For instance, when we see a car driving towards us, we do not want to wait to run various scenarios in our head or to discuss with the person next to us what we should do. No. Instead, we immediately step out of the direction of the car to avoid the collision. However, when we are talking about bringing about fundamental and lasting change and transforming the status quo, there is no room for hasty decisions. We do not want to replace one challenge with another. We want to make a sustainable and durable change, and for that, we need to understand the context. We need to understand our context quite well, inside out, and then evaluate various scenarios. In fundraising, if we are looking into bringing about sustainable streams of fund to our organization, we need to review the history of the organization and build up on its successes and what has been tried and failed. In this episode, I share with you how I believe we can achieve a sustainable and durable change by moving beyond doing things according to a system or method, and instead embracing the relation between our actions and the entire system, and understand how our actions affect the entire system. During the systemic review stage, we first identify the underlying assumptions of the problem we are dealing with and ensure a clear distinction between the symptoms and the problems. And that's how Back in 2012, I started my own business in fundraising to help organizations raise the required funds to continue their work. The more I worked in the field, the more I realized that writing one proposal after the other is definitely not a sustainable way to keep an organization afloat. This inspired me to look for a more holistic approach to the field of fundraising. I started with advising and supporting my clients to diversify their sources of funding, to avoid being dependent on only one institutional donor, and also build a community around their cause who would not only financially but also socially support them. In most cases, my clients were positive about the approach, but were not willing to take the required action to build this community-based support, because it needed time investment and considerable amount of patience. Most organizations have a firefighting approach towards fundraising, meaning that they only react to call for proposals, and the moment they get the massive funding from an institutional donor for the next couple of years, they focus on implementation and cross off fundraising from their priority list. This made me realize that what I was asking my clients to do was not just doing their fundraising differently, but fundamentally changing the way they look at money and financial resources. So, because it was a change, I needed to learn how to manage, or better to say, how to lead this change for them and with them. So I started my journey in change management by reading the book Leading Change by John P. Cotter. This book has been considered as one of the most influential books in the domain of change management. For a while, I followed the 8-step process of change management of Cotter, and I even taught this methodology in online and offline courses. However, after a while, I felt that this model is also not holistic enough and does not cover all the elements of change. That's why I started a research in how I can make this model more inclusive and applicable to different domains. That's why I ended up designing my own model. The first step in Kotter's model is creating an urgency. The urgent feeling that we need to make a change, otherwise we are going to fail. This did not work for me, as I believe this type of urgency is fear-based, and I believe we need to approach issues from a position of positivity and hope. Also, this fear-based approach felt too religious to me. For instance, most religions say that we should pray and be good people because otherwise we go to hell or other forms of punishment. And I believe we should be good people because of the merits of goodness and not because we will be punished otherwise. So that's why the first stage of my model is not about creating a sense of urgency, but about systemically reviewing ourselves, our environment, and our history. You may have noticed that I use the term systemic instead of systematic. Let me explain the difference between these two terms. Systemic is perceived as a more modern version of systematic, but there is also a fundamental difference in my opinion. Systematic is bound to system and order, and it implies that our actions follow the orders of that system. Systematic is bound to system and order, and it implies that our actions follow the orders that the system has put in place. It is hence systematic. Systemic, however, is looking at the system from a detached position and analyze how our actions are related to the system and how this system affects our actions and the other way around. Therefore, I have chosen the term systemic review for the first stage of my change management model. During this stage, as mentioned earlier, we dig into our assumptions. We explore the underlying conditions which makes us make certain decisions or take certain actions. We also dig into the problem at hand. Are we addressing the symptoms of the problem or the problem itself? Then we move to a bird's eye view and look at the environment and look at our environment and our history, our background. How is this problem situated in our environment and how the events in the past has influenced it? What are the other challenges that are linked to this problem and what opportunities it provides us with if we address it now? Applying my model in the domain of fundraising at this stage means that we need to review our reasons for raising funds, and we need to explore under what conditions our fundraising efforts were successful or have failed. We need to understand how different elements of our fundraising strategy have come together, including the role that our board have played in the success of our fundraising efforts. With this introduction to systemic review, let's discuss the role of the board in the success of our fundraising strategy and efforts. Here comes the music. The board of your organization The board of your organization has a... Okay, I don't know this... Hold on, sorry. The board of your organization has a multi-layered responsibility to ensure that your organization is on sound financial footing. Part of this role includes both giving to and getting money for your organization. We will discuss how to ensure that prospective board members understand this role before being recruited to serve on your board. The key to getting your board members to embrace fundraising lies in 3 simple steps. The recruitment process, ensuring that the board members are committed to your organization, and removing the fear of fundraising that is inherent in most people. For most non-profit organizations, building an effective board is one of the greatest challenges. How do you find good board members? How do you get them to join the board and become active in fundraising? And how do you keep them involved once they are on board? Often good board members are hard to find, and sometimes it is difficult to assess their commitments to the organization until they are on the board, when it is then too late. Some boards struggle because there is no clear direction for them and they haven't bought into the vision of the organization. Finding committed, dedicated, and dedicated board leadership is often a challenge. Board members are often reluctant to fundraise because they have not been recruited with that purpose in mind. Even if you originally intended for your board to be involved in fundraising, many times board recruiters are reluctant to refer to fundraising because of the fear and this. No, this doesn't read well. Many times, this is kind of, I don't want to, even if you originally intended for your board to be involved in fundraising, many times board recruiters are reluctant to refer to it for the fear of scaring off potential members. Many well-intentioned organizations operate under the noble idea that once they get on your board and see the great work we are doing, they will want to go out and ask for money. This is a very wrong assumption. If board members have not been told upfront that fundraising is a part of their role, they will not embrace it later when you decide to slip it into their job description. You may need to rethink who does the recruiting of your board members. Instead of a nominating committee that meets once a year to fill vacant seats, you should appoint a year-round board resource committee. This committee can also be called the governance committee or the committee on the directorship, or any name with which you feel comfortable. Whatever the title, following are the key functions to remember about this committee. First, it needs to meet year-round. 2, it should be chaired by one of the strongest members of your board. 3, it should assess board performance, both the board as a whole and individual board members. 4, it is responsible for developing or refining board positions descriptions. 5, it evaluates the needs of your board and develops a profile of the kinds of people needed to fill vacancies on the board. 6, it works with your whole board to help find the right people to fill vacant board positions. 7, it ensures diversity on board. Remember that diversity includes more than just ethnic diversity. It should include we will 7. 8, it works with staff to plan and implement board orientation. And 9, it is responsible for planning and implementing ongoing education for the board. No, where are we? Now, what are the basic responsibilities of non-for-profit boards or any other boards in general? They determine the organization's mission and purpose. A statement of mission and purpose should articulate the organization's goals, means, and primary constituents served. It is the board's responsibility to create the mission statement and review it I cannot pronounce this word now. And review it regularly for accuracy and validity. Each individual board member should fully understand and support it. Goals and purpose can be reviewed, but mission does not change. We should keep that in mind. Board members also select the executive boards. They must reach consensus on the executive director's job description and undertake a careful search process to find the most qualified individual for the position. The board also supports the executive and review executives' performance. The board should ensure that the executive director has the moral and professional support needed to further the goals of the organization. The executive director, in partnership with the entire board, should decide upon a regular evaluation of the executive director's performance. The board also ensures effective organizational planning. Boards must actively participate with the staff in an overall planning process and assist in implementing the plan's goals. Moreover, the board ensures adequate resources for the organization. This is one of the most one of the board's foremost responsibilities. No, again. One of the board's foremost responsibility is to provide adequate resources for the organization to fulfill its mission. Also, the board manages resources effectively. The board, in order to remain accountable to its donors and the public, and to safeguard its tax-exempt status, must assist in developing the annual budget and ensure the proper financial controls are in place. The board is also involved in determining and monitoring the organization's program and services, as well as enhancing the organization's public image. An organization's primary link to the community, including constituents, the public, and the media, is the board. Clearly articulating the organization's mission, accomplishments, and goals to the public, as well as garnering support from important members of the community, is an important element of a comprehensive public relations strategy. Lastly, the board assesses its own performance by evaluating this is a very long text, sorry. And finally, the board assesses its own performance. By evaluating its own performance in fulfilling its responsibility, the board can recognize its achievements and reach consensus on which areas need to be improved. We talked about the diversity of the board. This includes profession, income level, religion, age, gender, geographical location, ethnic group, language,